Hello and welcome. Welcome back to 270. Today we're going to learn how to do requirements the agile way. So before we were making these structured requirements documents with user and system requirements and functional and non-functional requirements, and these are great for contract negotiation, for really big projects where you need to specify everything in detail. It's good to have these in general, even if you're developing in an agile way, but most startups, small organizations, small bits, etc., they're not going to go through that formal and detailed process. You've seen how difficult it is, and of course requirements are constantly changing, so the stuff that you learn there probably is going to be obsolete relatively quickly. You're going to have to keep coming back and making changes to that document, which you're also going to get to do, so congratulations. You get to enjoy that pain just so that you can really experience it. But there is another way that agile software developers try to represent their requirements, and those are user stories, personas, scenarios, storyboards, all kind of a derivative of user stories. So when I say user story in general, I include things like storyboards and scenarios, which we'll look at in a bit. I'm just using user story as kind of a catch-all, although if you want to get more specific, most people consider a user story to be a very particular thing, so we'll get into that soon. So let's start with personas first. So personas basically come to us from the marketing world, the advertising world, basically from the creative kind of writing environment. Persona is like an archetype of a person. So like when you think of a librarian, you think of a particular human being that is a librarian. What does the archetypal librarian look like? What does the archetypal librarian enjoy? You can get into more detail, like an old angry librarian has a certain archetype too. And we try to structure these personas to represent the users that are going to be using our application, or the stakeholders that are going to be involved in it too. Usually when we make a persona, at least in like modern agile space, we try to give them as much detail as possible. We try to turn them into like an approximation of a real character. So it's almost like we're writing a book and we're describing what a character in the book is going to be. So sometimes we give them a fake picture, we give them a fake name, we give them a title, we say a little bit about their life, their interests, what moves them. These things help designers down the road who are going to figure out how your app should be laid out, different parts of the front-end experience, how it works, etc., etc. These help designers understand what it is that they're making, who they're making it for, because human beings aren't very great at building something when they don't know who it's being built for. So your persona is your typical fictional character, okay? A typical user or stakeholder, but not a real one. So you might base them off of things that you've learned from real people, but it's not an actual human being. Just bear in mind it is a fictional person, generally speaking. So for some examples, I gave you a link where you can go and see, I think there's like 10 different personas, and you'll see that there are some common threads among the examples that I provide you. I'll put this link in Discord when I'm done here. Each persona has a name. They have background information, like a biography. They have different information like that makes it more personal. This is not as important for you guys. I don't really need you to write a book, but you can give them a little bit of background. Most importantly, perhaps, is that the persona describes that person's needs, their goals, their frustrations, things that motivate them. Those are typically the most important points of emphasis, because what we're trying to do is figure out how our software can meet their needs, satisfy their goals, remove their frustrations, help them achieve their motivations, etc. So we're not talking about our software at all, and you'll see that in the example. Personas don't really talk about our software. They might talk about the kinds of things that people who use our software are interested in. They might even talk about a competitor's product that we're trying to defeat, but we're fundamentally talking about the person's needs and goals, not how our software satisfies them at this point. So a bio, interests, personality traits, those can be useful. You don't need to be that elaborate. Some hints for building a person. So the most important thing when you're building a persona, did I say person? The most important thing when you're building a persona is to base it on research. If you just kind of use your own biases and apply what you think that people will like or people are like, then you're probably going to come up with a crappy persona. So you need to do some research and craft a persona that's actually based on evidence that you've collected. Some obvious sources of evidence are just research like on the internet or Googling preferences, that kind of thing. But beyond that, you could question a focus group. Today you have the opportunity to question Company Co's prestigious focus group. They're actually able to get you any kind of human being you want on the planet, which is truly a tremendous opportunity. You can observe users that are interacting with a prototype that you've built. So this is probably one of the highest quality ways to generate data. And you might say, well, look, I only have like 45 minutes and I have time to generate a prototype. Well, it doesn't have to be elaborate. It can be a simple prototype. You don't have to go nuts with it. You can observe users interacting with a similar app too, if you can find something. That's a great move. Or just handling a similar problem or a similar situation. Doesn't necessarily have to be something for which software already exists. So you can watch them perform a task, see where their pain points are, and figure out how you could make that easier with your software. And you could float ideas to the focus group and just kind of gauge their response. So maybe the least lowest quality data is just to kind of come up with some ideas and say, would you be interested in this? Would you be interested in that? The problem with this one, and the reason it's the lowest quality, is that a lot of the time people don't really know what they want as well as they would think. And until you actually develop it and show it to them and they can see it, so basically a prototype, they might have a hard time conceptualizing what you're talking about and telling you how interested that they are. So the prototype is the better alternative to this. But of course, we don't have the time and energy to make a prototype of everything. So highest quality, try to make a mock-up or a prototype, show that to your focus group. Use that information to build your persona. Here's an example of a really simple persona. You have Susie, age 7. She's deathly allergic to gluten, she loves kittens and strawberry jam, and she wishes that she could have toast for breakfast every day. How can we solve Susie's problems? This brings us to user stories and scenarios. A user story is a short statement of a person's needs and goals, why they need those things, and how the software might solve them. And if you put that in a longer form factor, over like a couple paragraphs or so, we usually call it a scenario. So really, I want you to write scenarios because I don't want you to write like one line, but most people, if you show them a paragraph that describes a person's needs and goals, why they need them, and how the software solves them, they would call that a user story. The terminology scenario is much less common. So basically we're writing user scenarios today, but let's not nitpick about terminology. Now a bunch of stories collected together into a nice long piece, maybe about multiple different users, but typically about like one user or one group of users, is called an epic. We call it an epic because it's long, so like an epic novel. Sometimes, though, epic also refers to your user story's rough draft. So you start by writing kind of everything that you can think of, and you end up with this very long user story, and then you cut that down. So when some people say epic, they refer to the lower granularity user story that you come up with at the beginning. So this kind of depends on who you ask. I think this term doesn't have as much standardization as user story or scenario. Now, if you add pictures to it, then you've got a storyboard. I think everybody's familiar with storyboards from like cartoon animation and film and stuff. So if you're trying to lay out a story and you add pictures to it, you have basically like a comic. Well, now you've got a storyboard. Lovely. And something to keep in mind is that stories are often written to satisfy a persona. You can write stories independent of personas, and many people do. You can just write stories for your users, but if you have a persona in mind, you can also write a story about one of your personas or that satisfies one of your persona's different needs, wants, motivations, etc. Stories can tell us, what do users do? How do they do it? A simple user story. Susie wants to eat toast every morning, but her current toaster is too ineffective to make toast within an hour of her waking up. Well, of course our Toast Pro toaster is going to solve that. See, Susie has a pain point that she needs addressed. I omitted the rest of the story. I'm keeping these like short one-liners. We'll see what a long-form one looks like when I get to scenario. So, Bob makes his living repairing toasters and would love a quality product that he can maintain for decades. Jerry fights fires caused by cheap, faulty toasters, and he wants to never have to save another kitten from a burning toaster fire, but existing toasters are just too dangerous. So this is a cool one because it also satisfies one of Susie's motivations, which is that she loves kittens, right? So you can have some overlap between your personas if you're clever. So as a solid template, this is kind of the thought process that you should follow. So you should start with like, as what kind of person am I, or what particular persona am I representing? I want, and then something that I want, or I need, or I'm frustrated by, or whatever. So it doesn't have to be a positive, it could be a negative, but usually we would phrase those as I want bad thing to stop, or bad thing to get better. And then next we want to look at so that, why do I want it, or why do I want it to stop, or why do I want it to get better, or whatever. So a little bit of your motivation there. And sometimes we can finish with but. So why isn't it possible with the existing products? Why haven't you satisfied those motivations already? As a bonus, you can include criteria that satisfy the story. So what improvement actually resolves the user's need? A simple longer scenario, so this would be like a long user story. Susie wakes up, it's Friday morning and her stomach is empty. There's half a bottle of strawberry jam in the fridge, but nothing else. 2 slices of gluten-free bread in the pantry. Susie puts her bread in the Toast Pro toaster and sets it to max. Within minutes, it goes pop, and she's snacking on delicious toast. So we've set up the scenario, we've set up her frustration, we've set up the environment and her limitations and everything, and we've set up how the product solves her frustrations, all in one nice little compact story. More elaborate scenarios are better depicted with some visual representation, so be it wireframes or flowcharts. A wireframe is just some boxes connected with little thin lines. A flowchart has directional arrows that kind of point around, so these are very similar charts. You can make these with tools like Draw.io or Figma. A simple wireframe can help you track how one event leads to another, and connecting related stories together into an epic can help you keep track of how different stakeholders relate to one another, so you can sort of not just connect things in terms of how they sequence, like flowcharts do, but also connect like this story relates to this one. That's where the wireframe kind of comes in to let you connect things that are related in ways other than by time. So your goals when writing these user stories, first of all, you definitely want to capture requirements. So the point of this is to outline requirements in a human-readable way, so you can look back over the requirements that you've written, and now you can work backwards and try to write user stories that capture those. Your task today is going to be to write user stories that capture requirements from a different team. And you want to capture non-functional requirements too. Consider the non-functional constraints that your different personas might care about. Are they obsessed with efficiency? Are they obsessed with looks, performance, whatever? They might have different non-functional preferences as well. Why would they choose your product over a different one too? Make sure you're abstracting away all the implementation details. Your user story, unless it's for some reason relevant, and there's very few situations where it is, shouldn't be talking about something like what programming language it's written in, because your users don't care about that. The story doesn't address the programming language, because that's not something that the user's interested in. And that's it for today. I think I went a little over my time here, so I wanted to give you a while to work here. The first step is you are going to take the document that you should have prepared by the beginning of class, and you're going to share it in the chat channel of the team below you. So last team wraps around to the top, and just follow the instructions on Canvas there. And you are basically going to generate user stories for that document, the one that is shared with you today. So you are acting as a consultant. And in the last roughly 20-30 minutes of class, you're going to have a chance to talk to the team that you reviewed, and then you'll have a chance for the team that reviewed you to talk to you. So as soon as you're ready to review the other team, let them know in their channel that you're ready, and as soon as another team tells you that they're ready to review you, go down there and join them, and then hopefully when you're done, you still have time left over to review the team that you were working on. But we'll just do it on a first come, first served basis. All right, I'll see you in Discord.